Have you ever been judged by your job title? Ever felt the sting of someone looking down on you because of what you do for a living? What if I told you that the most powerful people often hide in plain sight, wearing uniforms that make others dismiss them completely? This is the true story of Emma Rodriguez, a woman whose quiet strength and hidden identity would shake the foundation of one man's arrogant world. In a society where money talks and status symbols define worth, sometimes the most extraordinary people are serving your coffee, cleaning your office, or taking your order. Marcus Blackstone thought he knew everything about power, wealth, and success. As a billionaire who built his empire from nothing, he believed his money gave him the right to look down on others. But on one ordinary Tuesday evening at Romano's Italian restaurant, his world would collide with a woman who would teach him that true power doesn't always come with a price tag. What happens when unstoppable arrogance meets unmovable dignity? When a man who thinks money can buy respect encounters a woman whose quiet strength could move mountains. This is more than just a story about a rude billionaire and a patient waitress. This is about the moment when someone's carefully constructed world of assumptions crumbles, revealing truths that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about success, respect, and the power of hidden identities. Get ready for a journey that will challenge every assumption you've ever made about the people around you. Because sometimes, the person serving your dinner might just be the one who could change your entire life. Emma Rodriguez adjusted her black apron one more time before stepping into Romano's Italian restaurant for her evening shift. The familiar scent of garlic and fresh basil filled the air as she tied her dark hair back into a neat ponytail. After 3 years working at this upscale downtown establishment, she had learned to navigate the complex social dynamics that came with serving wealthy clientele. Some customers treated her with basic respect, while others seemed to view her as nothing more than furniture that happened to bring food. Tonight felt different somehow. The October rain drummed steadily against the large windows, creating an intimate atmosphere in the dimly lit restaurant. Emma checked her watch, noting she had arrived 15 minutes early as always. Her manager, Tony, waved at her from behind the bar where he was polishing wine glasses. "Emma, thank goodness you're here," Tony called out. "We've got a full house tonight, and that new server called in sick again. Think you can handle the VIP section?" The VIP section meant bigger tips, but it also meant dealing with the most demanding customers. Emma nodded confidently. "Of course, Tony. Which tables am I covering?" "Tables 12 through 16. Fair warning, though, we've got some big shots coming in tonight." The reservation system shows a Marcus Blackstone booked table 14 for 8 o'clock. Word is he's some kind of business mogul. Apparently, he's very particular about service. Emma had heard the name before in passing conversations around the restaurant. Marcus Blackstone was known for his real estate empire and his reputation for being ruthless in business. She had never served him personally, but other servers had mentioned his demanding nature and tendency to send food back if it wasn't perfect. "I'll take care of everything," Emma assured Tony, checking her notepad and pen. She had learned long ago that confidence and professionalism could handle almost any difficult customer. The dinner rush began promptly at 6:30. Emma moved efficiently between her tables, taking orders, delivering food, and ensuring water glasses never sat empty. Her natural grace and genuine smile had earned her a reputation as one of Romano's best servers. Regular customers often requested her specifically, appreciating her ability to remember their preferences and make thoughtful recommendations. At exactly 8 o'clock, Marcus Blackstone arrived with a small entourage. Emma recognized him immediately from the photos she had seen in business magazines that customers occasionally left behind. He was a tall man in his early 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and everything about his appearance screamed money and power. 2 other men accompanied him, both younger and clearly subordinates based on how they deferred to his every gesture. Marcus surveyed the restaurant with calculating eyes, as if evaluating its worth down to the last detail. When the hostess led them to table 14, he pulled out his phone and began typing, not bothering to acknowledge her presence or say thank you. Emma approached their table with her usual professional smile, carrying menus and water glasses. "Good evening, gentlemen." Welcome to Romano's. I'm Emma, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink while you look over the menu? Marcus barely glanced up from his phone. Sparkling water. San Pellegrino. Make sure it's properly chilled. And I want to see a wine list immediately. His tone was clipped and dismissive, as if speaking to Emma was an inconvenience. Certainly, Emma replied, maintaining her professional demeanor. She set down the menus and turned to the other two men. And, for you gentlemen? The younger man with glasses cleared his throat nervously. I'll have a Diet Coke, please. Coffee for me, said the third man, who appeared to be around 40 with thinning hair. Emma nodded and headed to the bar to prepare their drinks. She could hear Marcus's voice carrying across the restaurant as he spoke loudly into his phone about some business deal, apparently unconcerned about disturbing other diners. Several nearby tables glanced over with annoyed expressions, but no one said anything. When she returned with the drinks and wine list, Marcus was still on his phone. She waited politely for a natural pause in his conversation before setting down his San Pellegrino. Instead of acknowledging her service, he waved his hand dismissively, as if shooing away a fly. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes? Emma asked when he finally ended his call. Marcus looked at her directly for the first time, his eyes cold and appraising. Do you have any idea who I am? The question came out of nowhere, catching Emma slightly off guard. I know your name is Mr. Blackstone, and I'm here to ensure you have an excellent dining experience, Emma replied evenly. He leaned back in his chair, a condescending smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I own half the buildings in this city. My company employs thousands of people. I make more money in a day than you probably make in a year. He paused, letting his words sink in. So when I tell you I want something, I expect it to happen immediately. Do we understand each other? Emma felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she got whenever someone tried to diminish her worth based on her job. She had dealt with arrogant customers before, but something about Marcus's tone particularly grated on her nerves. Still, she maintained her composure. I understand completely, Mr. Blackstone. What can I get for you this evening? I want the lobster ravioli, but I want the chef to prepare it personally. Not some line cook. The actual chef. And I want it cooked exactly 4 minutes, not a second longer. The pasta should have just enough bite to it. If it's overcooked, I'm sending it back. He handed her the menu without looking at her again. Also, I want fresh ground Parmesan, not that pre-grated garbage most places try to pass off. Emma wrote down his specific requirements, knowing that the head chef would need to be informed about the unusual timing request. Of course. And for you gentlemen? She asked, turning to his companions. They ordered more standard dishes, clearly relieved not to be the focus of Marcus's attention. As Emma headed toward the kitchen to place their order, she heard Marcus make another phone call, his voice booming across the restaurant. Johnson, I don't care if it's past business hours. When I call, you answer. That's what I pay you for. His laughter was harsh and grating. These people don't understand that time is money. Every minute they waste costs me thousands. In the kitchen, Emma found Chef Romano going over preparations for the evening specials. Giuseppe Romano was a third-generation Italian chef who took immense pride in his craft. When Emma explained Marcus's specific requirements, the chef's eyebrows shot up. 4 minutes exactly? For lobster ravioli. Giuseppe shook his head. This man, he thinks he knows my job better than I do. He's very particular, Emma said diplomatically. And he specifically requested that you prepare it personally. Giuseppe sighed, but nodded. For you, Emma, I will do this. But if he sends it back, I'm not making it again. My ravioli is perfect the way I make it. While waiting for the food to be prepared, Emma continued serving her other tables. She noticed that several diners kept glancing toward Marcus's table with annoyed expressions.
It's complimentary, sir.
His
Enjoy.
loud phone conversations and demanding tone were disrupting the restaurant's usually peaceful atmosphere. When the appetizers were ready, Emma carefully balanced the plates and headed back to table 14. Marcus was in the middle of another animated phone conversation, gesturing wildly with his free hand. She approached quietly and began setting down the plates. I don't care what the environmental reports say, Marcus was saying loudly. We're not spending an extra $1 million just to make some tree huggers happy. Build around it or cut it down, I don't care which. Emma tried not to react to his callous words, focusing instead on her job. As she placed his appetizer in front of him, Marcus suddenly ended his call and looked down at the plate with a frown. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is the bruschetta appetizer you ordered, sir," Emma replied. Marcus picked up one piece and examined it closely. "The tomatoes look wilted. And this bread isn't toasted enough." He set it down without taking a bite. "Take it back." Emma looked at the bruschetta, which appeared perfectly fresh and properly prepared. The tomatoes were bright red and glistening with herbs and olive oil, and the bread had the ideal golden brown color that Giuseppe was famous for. She realized that Marcus was simply testing her, seeing how far he could push. "I'll have the chef prepare a fresh order," she said calmly, picking up the plate. "And next time, make sure you check the food before you bring it out," Marcus added. "That's basic service. I shouldn't have to teach you how to do your job." The words stung, but Emma had learned long ago not to let difficult customers see their impact on her. She returned to the kitchen, where Giuseppe looked at the returned bruschetta in confusion. "What's wrong with this?" he asked, examining his work. "This is perfect." He said the tomatoes looked wilted and the bread wasn't toasted enough, Emma explained. Giuseppe's face reddened with indignation. "Wilted? These tomatoes were cut 15 minutes ago, and the bread is toasted exactly as it should be." He began preparing a new order, muttering in Italian under his breath. When Emma returned with the replacement appetizer, Marcus barely glanced at it before taking a small bite. He chewed thoughtfully, then nodded slightly. "Better," he said curtly, as if he was doing her a favor by accepting it. The evening continued in this pattern. Marcus found fault with nearly everything, from the temperature of his water to the timing between courses. Each complaint was delivered with increasing condescension, as if Emma was personally responsible for every minor imperfection in the universe. "You're just a waitress," he said at one point when she politely suggested he might enjoy the wine special. "I don't need dining recommendations from someone whose biggest decision each day is whether to wear the black shoes or the other black shoes." His companions shifted uncomfortably at his rudeness, but neither spoke up to defend Emma. She could see the embarrassment in their eyes, but their fear of their boss was stronger than their sense of decency. As the evening wore on, Marcus Blackstone's behavior grew increasingly hostile. Emma had served difficult customers before, but never one who seemed so determined to make her job as unpleasant as possible. What started as mere rudeness had escalated into something that felt almost personal, though they had never met before tonight. During the main course, Marcus had spilled red wine on his white shirt, clearly from his own careless gesture while gesturing during another loud phone call. However, when Emma approached to offer assistance or perhaps a club soda to help with the stain, Marcus's eyes lit up with malicious opportunity. "Look what you've done," he shouted, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Several conversations stopped mid-sentence as diners turned to look. "This shirt costs more than you make in a month, and now it's ruined because you can't watch where you're going." Emma stood frozen, knowing full well that she had been nowhere near his table when the spill occurred. She had been delivering dessert menus to table 16 when she heard the crash of his wine glass hitting his plate. But Marcus was creating a scene, and she realized he was deliberately trying to humiliate her in front of the entire restaurant. "Sir, I was actually serving another table when," Emma began, keeping her voice calm and professional. "Are you calling me a liar?" Marcus interrupted, his voice rising even higher. "I saw you bump into my chair. You're not only clumsy, you're dishonest too." He stood up abruptly, towering over Emma and making sure his voice carried across the restaurant. "This is exactly what's wrong with the service industry these days. No accountability, no professionalism, and certainly no class." Emma could feel the eyes of every customer in the restaurant focused on their interaction. Her face burned with embarrassment, not because she had done anything wrong, but because Marcus was deliberately trying to destroy her dignity in front of everyone. His two dinner companions looked mortified, staring down at their plates as if they could disappear into the tablecloth. "I apologize for any inconvenience," Emma said, her voice steady despite the humiliation she felt. "I'd be happy to help you with the stain, or we could comp your meal tonight to make up for this incident." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that made several nearby diners wince. "Comp my meal? Do you have any idea what I spend on dinner in places that actually matter? This entire restaurant probably doesn't make in a week what I spend on a single business lunch. He looked around the restaurant, making sure his audience was still paying attention. And, you think taking $50 off my bill is going to matter to me? Emma noticed Tony making his way across the restaurant, clearly having heard the commotion. Other staff members were also watching nervously, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of what was clearly becoming an ugly situation. Regular customers who knew Emma were shaking their heads in disgust at Marcus's behavior. "Sir, perhaps we could discuss this more privately," Emma suggested, hoping to de-escalate the situation before it got worse. "Privately?" Marcus scoffed. "Why would I want privacy? I think everyone here should know exactly what kind of service this place provides." He turned to address the other diners directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what passes for professional service these days. Clumsy, careless, and then argumentative when called out on it." An elderly gentleman at a nearby table cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me, young man, but I saw what happened. The young lady was nowhere near your table when you spilled that wine yourself." Several other diners nodded in agreement, murmuring their support for Emma. Marcus's face reddened, clearly not expecting to be challenged by other customers. "I don't recall asking for your opinion," he snapped at the elderly man. "Maybe you need to get your eyes checked along with your hearing." The restaurant had gone completely silent now, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Emma realized that Marcus had crossed a line from merely being rude to her to insulting paying customers who had done nothing but tell the truth. This wasn't just about his treatment of her anymore. He was alienating everyone around him. Tony finally reached their table, his face stern but professional. "Mr. Blackstone, is there a problem here? Perhaps we can resolve this quietly." Marcus turned his attention to Tony, apparently delighted to have a new target. "The problem is that your staff is completely incompetent, and your customers are apparently blind." He gestured dismissively toward the elderly gentleman who had defended Emma. "I'm beginning to think this entire establishment is third-rate." "Sir, I've been watching the situation, and I can assure you that Emma is one of our finest servers," Tony replied diplomatically. "If there's been a misunderstanding, Marcus interrupted. "The only misunderstanding here is me thinking this place might actually provide service worthy of my time." He looked directly at Emma, his eyes cold and calculating. "You want to know what the real problem is here? It's people like her who don't understand their place in the world." Emma felt something shift inside her chest. She had endured his personal attacks on her professionalism, his lies about the wine spill, and his general rudeness throughout the evening. But now he was suggesting that she didn't know her place, and the implication was clear. In his mind, her place was beneath him, permanently and absolutely, simply because of the uniform she wore. "People like me?" Emma asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. Marcus smiled, apparently enjoying the opportunity to elaborate on his point. "Service people. Workers. You go through life thinking you deserve the same respect as people who actually matter, people who create jobs and build businesses and contribute something meaningful to society." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dripping with condescension. "But the truth is, you're just a waitress. That's all you'll ever be. And until you accept that, you'll never be truly good at even that simple job." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the sympathetic stares of customers who had witnessed this ugly scene unfold. She thought about all the ways she could respond, all the things she could say to put Marcus Blackstone in his place right here and right now. She could tell him about the foundation she ran, about the millions of dollars she allocated each year to educational programs and community development projects. She could mention the scholarship programs that had sent hundreds of underprivileged students to college, or the literacy programs that had helped entire communities learn to read. She could talk about the board meetings she attended, the budgets she approved, the life-changing decisions she made on a daily basis. Instead, Emma simply nodded and said, "I'll get your check." Marcus leaned back in his chair, clearly satisfied with what he perceived as his victory. Finally, some recognition of reality. He turned to his dinner companions, who were both staring at their plates in obvious embarrassment. "You see, gentlemen, sometimes people need to be reminded of the natural order of things. It's not cruel, It's just honest. As Emma walked toward the computer terminal to print their check, she could hear whispered conversations resuming throughout the restaurant. She caught fragments of comments from outraged diners who had witnessed Marcus's behavior. Absolutely disgraceful. I've never seen anything so rude. That poor girl handled it better than I would have. Someone should report him to management. Tony appeared beside her as she printed the check. Emma, I am so sorry about this. You don't have to serve him anymore. I'll take over from here. Emma shook her head. It's okay, Tony. I can finish this. She looked back toward table 14, where Marcus was now regaling his companions with what sounded like another story about his business conquests. Some people need to learn lessons the hard way. When Emma returned with the check, Marcus glanced at it briefly and pulled out a platinum credit card. Finally, some efficiency, he said. Maybe there's hope for you after all. As Emma processed his payment, Marcus continued his monologue. You know, I might actually do you a favor here. I know people in the hospitality industry. With the right recommendation, you could probably get a job at a better establishment. Somewhere that would appreciate having someone who knows her place. Emma handed him the receipt to sign, her expression neutral. That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Blackstone. Marcus signed the receipt with a flourish, then looked up at Emma with what he probably thought was a magnanimous expression. I'm leaving you a $20 tip, which is more than generous considering the service I received. But I believe in rewarding people when they finally start to understand how things work. $20 on a $300 check was actually an insult, and they both knew it. But Marcus was making a point, demonstrating his power to reward or punish as he saw fit. He was showing everyone in the restaurant that he controlled the situation, that he could humiliate someone and then throw them a few dollars as if that made everything acceptable. Thank you, Emma said simply, taking the receipt. As Marcus and his companions prepared to leave, he made sure to deliver one final insult. He stood up slowly, straightening his wine-stained shirt, and looked around the restaurant to ensure he had everyone's attention. Well, this has been educational, he announced to the room. Sometimes you have to come to places like this to remind yourself how good you have it. He looked directly at Emma. And sometimes service people need to be reminded that humility is a virtue. I hope tonight was a learning experience for you. With that, Marcus Blackstone walked toward the exit, his companions trailing behind him like embarrassed shadows. Emma watched him go, her face giving nothing away. Several customers immediately approached her, offering words of support and expressing their outrage at what they had witnessed. Honey, that man was completely out of line, said a middle-aged woman who had been dining with her husband. You handled that with more grace than he deserved. The elderly gentleman who had defended her earlier patted Emma's shoulder gently. I've been coming to this restaurant for 15 years, and you're one of the finest servers I've ever encountered. Don't let that awful man make you think otherwise. The next morning, Emma Rodriguez sat in her real office, 30 floors above the street, in one of the city's most prestigious downtown towers. The panoramic view from her corner office overlooked the financial district, where she could see the buildings that housed banks, investment firms, and corporate headquarters that shaped the economic landscape of the entire region. Her office was a study in understated elegance. Awards and recognition plaques lined one wall, acknowledging her work in education and community development. A large mahogany desk held neat stacks of documents, reports from the various programs funded by the Rodriguez Foundation, and correspondence from universities, schools, and community organizations across the country. Emma had barely slept the night before, not because of the humiliation she had endured at Romano's, but because she was planning her response to Marcus Blackstone's behavior. She had dealt with arrogant people before, but never someone who had so deliberately and publicly tried to destroy another person's dignity simply because he could. At 8 o'clock sharp, her assistant Sarah knocked and entered with a cup of coffee and the day's schedule. Sarah was a bright young woman who had worked for the foundation for 2 years, helping Emma manage the complex logistics of running multiple charitable programs. Good morning, Emma, Sarah said, setting the coffee on the desk. You have the board meeting at 10, lunch with the university presidents at noon, and the scholarship committee review at 3. But you look like you didn't sleep much. Everything okay? Emma took a sip of coffee and looked out the window thoughtfully. Sarah, I need you to do some research for me this morning. I want everything you can find on a man named Marcus Blackstone. Business background, company structure, financial information, recent projects, media coverage. Everything. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Marcus Blackstone, the real estate developer? Is the foundation considering a partnership with his company? Something like that, Emma replied. I want a complete picture of his business operations by this afternoon. Also, see if you can find out what properties he owns, what development projects he's currently working on, and who his major business partners are. As Sarah left to begin her research, Emma turned to her computer and began making some calls of her own. One of the advantages of running a major charitable foundation was the network of contacts she had developed over the years. Bankers, politicians, business leaders, and community activists all knew Emma Rodriguez, even if they had never seen her waiting tables at Romano's. Her first call was to David Chun, a friend who worked in commercial real estate lending at one of the city's largest banks. David had helped the foundation acquire several properties for their community centers over the years, and he knew the local development market better than almost anyone. David, it's Emma Rodriguez. I hope I'm not calling too early. Emma, never too early for you. What can I do for you? I need some information about Marcus Blackstone and his company. Anything you can tell me about his current projects, financial situation, business practices. I'm considering some potential collaboration. David was quiet for a moment. Blackstone? Interesting. He's certainly successful, built quite an empire over the past 20 years. But, Emma, I have to tell you, his reputation in the industry is pretty mixed. He gets results, but his methods aren't always what you'd call ethical. What do you mean? Well, there have been persistent rumors about how he acquires properties for development. Nothing proven in court, but stories about pressuring elderly homeowners to sell below market value, using zoning loopholes to force out small businesses, that sort of thing. He's also known for being difficult to work with. Contractors, suppliers, even his own employees complain about his treatment of people. Emma made notes as David spoke. What about his financial situation? Is his business stable? On the surface, yes. But I've heard whispers that he's leveraged pretty heavily on some of his recent projects. Real estate development is always risky, and if a few deals go bad, David trailed off. Emma, can I ask what kind of collaboration you're considering? Because honestly, his values might not align with what the foundation represents. Thanks, David. That's exactly the kind of information I needed. I'll be in touch. Emma spent the next hour making similar calls to other contacts in the business and nonprofit community. A pattern began to emerge from these conversations. Marcus Blackstone was successful and wealthy, but his business practices were questionable, and his personal reputation was poor. Several people mentioned his arrogance and his tendency to look down on anyone he considered beneath his social status. When Sarah returned with her research, she had compiled an impressive dossier on Marcus Blackstone's business empire. Blackstone Development owned commercial properties throughout the city, had residential projects in 3 states, and was worth an estimated $200 million. But the financial details revealed some interesting vulnerabilities. He's definitely successful, Sarah reported, but some of his recent projects are heavily financed with debt. This luxury hotel project downtown has been delayed by environmental reviews, and there are cost overruns on the residential development on the west side. Also, I found some interesting information about his business practices. Sarah had discovered several news articles about controversies surrounding Blackstone development. There were complaints from community groups about developments that displaced longtime residents, allegations of cutting corners on construction safety, and reports of lawsuits from contractors who claimed they hadn't been paid properly. There's also this, Sarah continued, handing Emma a printed article. From last month, the City Planning Commission rejected his proposal for a new shopping complex because it would have required demolishing a community center that serves low-income families. According to this article, Blackstone called the decision bleeding heart politics and said the community center served people who don't contribute anything meaningful to society anyway. Emma read the article carefully, noting the quote that echoed almost exactly what Marcus had said to her the night before. This wasn't just personal rudeness. It was a pattern of viewing people in terms of their economic value to him personally. Sarah, I want you to look into something else. Find out everything you can about that community center he wanted to demolish. Who runs it, what programs they offer, who they serve. Also, see if you can get the details on why the Planning Commission rejected his proposal. As Emma prepared for her 10 o'clock board meeting, she was already formulating a plan that would teach Marcus Blackstone a lesson about underestimating people based on their appearances. But she needed to be careful. Any response had to be measured, professional, and ultimately constructive rather than merely vindictive. The board meeting for the Rodriguez Foundation was held in the conference room adjacent to Emma's office. 12 community leaders, business executives, and education professionals served on the board, helping to guide the foundation's mission of promoting education and economic opportunity for underserved communities. As Emma presented the quarterly report on their various programs, she found herself thinking about the community center that Marcus Blackstone had tried to demolish. The foundation's mission was to support exactly the kind of programs and services that places like that provided. "Emma, you seem distracted this morning," observed Dr. Margaret Foster, the retired university president who chaired the board. "Is everything all right?" Emma made a quick decision. "Actually, there's something I'd like to discuss with the board. It's about a potential new initiative." She stood and moved to the whiteboard at the front of the room. "I've been thinking about expanding our community development programs, particularly in areas where gentrification is displacing long-time residents." For the next 30 minutes, Emma outlined a proposal for a new program that would provide legal and financial assistance to community organizations fighting displacement. The foundation would offer grants for legal fees, help community groups navigate zoning and planning processes, and provide resources to help them present stronger cases to city officials. "This sounds excellent in theory," said board member Robert Kim, a prominent attorney. "But do we have specific communities in mind, or is this more of a general concept?" "I have some ideas about where we might start," Emma replied. "There's a community center downtown that recently faced a development challenge. I think it might be an excellent pilot case for this new program." The board unanimously approved Emma's proposal to begin developing the Community Assistance Program. As the meeting concluded, Emma felt a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with purpose. Marcus Blackstone's cruelty had reminded her of why her work mattered, and now she had a constructive way to push back against the kind of callous disregard he represented. After lunch with several university presidents who were discussing expanded scholarship partnerships, Emma returned to her office to find Sarah waiting with more research results. "I found out about that community center," Sarah reported. "It's called the Riverside Community Center, and it's amazing what they do. They provide after-school programs for kids, adult education classes, job training, even a food bank. They serve about 800 families in the area." What was Blackstone's specific objection to their location? According to the Planning Commission minutes, he claimed the building was underutilized and that a shopping complex would bring more jobs and tax revenue to the city. But when community members spoke at the hearing, they pointed out that his shopping complex would mainly feature high-end retail stores that most local residents couldn't afford to shop at. Emma reviewed the documents Sarah had gathered, noting 3 days after his humiliating treatment of Emma at Romano's, Marcus Blackstone sat in his luxurious office reviewing financial projections for his latest development project. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city, and everything in the office was designed to project power and success. From the imported marble floors to the handcrafted mahogany desk, every detail reinforced Marcus's image of himself as a master of his domain. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked and entered with his morning coffee and a stack of documents. "Your 10 o'clock is here, Mr. Blackstone. The representatives from First National Bank about the hotel project financing." Marcus barely looked up from his computer screen. "Tell them to wait. I'm reviewing the community center situation with Davidson." He was referring to City Councilman Richard Davidson, who had been working behind the scenes to help Marcus overcome the Planning Commission's rejection of his shopping complex proposal. As Jennifer left, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Davidson's number, and Marcus answered immediately. "Richard, please tell me you have good news about the Riverside situation." "Well, Marcus, that's what I'm calling about," Davidson replied, his voice sounding unusually tense. "We've hit a bit of a snag with the eminent domain approach." Marcus leaned back in his chair, annoyed. "What kind of snag?" "We discussed this. The city has the authority to claim the property if it serves the greater economic good." "That's just it," Davidson continued. The community center has apparently found some high-powered legal representation. They've filed an injunction against any eminent domain proceedings, and they're claiming the shopping complex doesn't meet the criteria for economic necessity. High-powered legal representation. Marcus laughed dismissively. Richard, this is a community center that operates on donations and grant money. They can't afford the kind of lawyers who could seriously challenge this. That's what I thought too. But I'm looking at paperwork from Morrison, Chun and Associates. That's one of the top law firms in the city, Marcus. They don't take cases like this unless someone with serious money is backing it. Marcus felt the first twinge of concern. Morrison, Chun and Associates was indeed a prestigious firm that typically represented major corporations and wealthy individuals. Who's paying their fees? That's what I'm trying to find out. The legal documents just list the community center as the client, but there's obviously someone else involved. Someone with deep pockets and good connections. After ending the call with Davidson, Marcus spent the next hour trying to focus on his banking meeting, but his mind kept returning to the community center situation. He had been so close to acquiring that property, and now some mystery benefactor was interfering with his plans. The hotel project financing meeting didn't go as well as Marcus had hoped. First National Bank was expressing concerns about some of his other leveraged properties, and they wanted additional guarantees before approving the loan increase he needed. By the time the bankers left, Marcus was feeling frustrated and slightly anxious about his financial position. That afternoon brought more unwelcome news. Jennifer informed him that the environmental review for his hotel project had been extended by another month, delaying construction and increasing his carrying costs. Then, his construction supervisor called to report that the residential development on the west side had encountered unexpected soil issues that would require expensive remediation. Mr. Blackstone, Jennifer said, appearing in his doorway with another concerned expression, I just received a call from the mayor's office. They want to schedule a meeting with you about community relations concerns. They wouldn't give me specifics, but they said it was regarding some complaints they've received. Marcus felt his irritation growing. Complaints? What kind of complaints? The assistant wouldn't elaborate, but she mentioned that several business leaders and community advocates had reached out to express concerns about Blackstone Development's impact on local neighborhoods. This was puzzling. Marcus had always maintained good relationships with city officials, primarily through strategic campaign contributions and well-placed favors. He couldn't think of any recent incidents that would have generated complaints to the mayor's office. As the day wore on, more small problems began to accumulate. A contractor called to report that a key supplier was demanding payment up front for materials, something they had never required before. His insurance company contacted him about reviewing coverage terms for his commercial properties. A business magazine that had been planning a feature article about his success story suddenly postponed the interview indefinitely. Individually, these issues were minor annoyances, but collectively, they created a pattern that made Marcus increasingly uncomfortable. It felt as though invisible forces were working against him, creating friction in areas of his business that normally ran smoothly. That evening, Marcus decided to have dinner at Romano's again, partly because he had genuinely enjoyed the food despite his poor treatment of the staff, and partly because he wanted to demonstrate that his complaints hadn't affected his willingness to return. In his mind, this would show that he was reasonable and forgiving, not the difficult customer the restaurant might have perceived him to be. When he arrived at Romano's, the hostess greeted him with professional courtesy, but without the warmth she typically showed to valued customers. She seated him at a table in the main dining room, not the VIP section he had occupied on his previous visit. Marcus noticed the change, but decided not to make an issue of it. His server tonight was a young man named Michael whom Marcus didn't recognize from his previous visit. As Michael took his drink order, Marcus found himself looking around the restaurant, half expecting to see the waitress he had encountered before. He realized he didn't even remember her name, which struck him as slightly embarrassing. "Excuse me," Marcus said when Michael returned with his wine. "Is Emma working tonight? She was my server a few days ago." Michael's expression became notably cooler. "Emma doesn't work Wednesday evenings. Is there something I can help you with?" There was something in Michael's tone that suggested he knew about the previous incident, and his attitude toward Marcus reflected his disapproval. Marcus felt oddly defensive, as if he needed to explain his behavior to this young server. I just wanted to. I thought I might have been a bit demanding last time. I was having a stressful day. Michael nodded politely but didn't respond, clearly not interested in discussing the situation. As the evening progressed, Marcus noticed that other staff members seemed to know who he was, and their service, while professional, lacked any warmth or genuine hospitality. The next morning brought the most serious development yet. Marcus arrived at his office to find Jennifer looking extremely concerned, holding a letter from the city's Department of Building and Safety. Mr. Blackstone, this came by courier this morning. They're requesting a comprehensive review of safety protocols and permit compliance for all active Blackstone development projects. Marcus read the letter carefully, his concern growing with each paragraph. The review would require detailed documentation of every aspect of his current construction projects, from worker safety procedures to environmental compliance measures. It would be time-consuming, expensive, and potentially delay multiple projects if any violations were found. This is ridiculous, Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. We follow all safety regulations. This is just bureaucratic harassment. But, as he continued reading, Marcus realized that the review had been triggered by specific complaints filed with the department. Someone had provided detailed allegations about unsafe working conditions, improper waste disposal, and violations of environmental protection standards. Jennifer, get Davidson on the phone immediately, and call our construction supervisors. I want to know if there's anything in our current projects that could cause problems in this review. The call with Councilman Davidson provided little comfort. Marcus, I've been hearing rumblings about this for a week. Someone's been making very detailed complaints to multiple city departments. Whoever it is knows exactly what to look for and how to present concerns in ways that trigger official reviews. Any idea who's behind it? No, but it's someone with connections and credibility. These aren't anonymous complaints from disgruntled neighbors. These are coming from sources the city takes seriously. Over the next few hours, Marcus's construction supervisors confirmed his worst fears. While there were no major safety violations, there were several areas where Blackstone development had been operating in gray zones, cutting corners on paperwork and taking shortcuts that, while not illegal, wouldn't look good under scrutiny. The soil remediation issue at the residential project, for example, had been handled with a quick fix that met minimum regulatory requirements, but fell short of best practices. The waste disposal at the hotel site had been managed by the lowest bidder, a company that had recently been cited for environmental violations on other projects. By Friday afternoon, Marcus was forced to acknowledge that his business was under serious pressure from multiple directions. The community center legal challenge, the city's safety review, the banking concerns, and the general atmosphere of increased scrutiny were creating a perfect storm of problems. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his office after everyone else had gone home, trying to understand what had gone wrong. A week ago, his business had been thriving, his projects were on track, and he had felt completely in control of his professional and personal life. On Monday morning, Marcus Blackstone arrived at his office to find the lobby of his building buzzing with unusual activity. Television news crews were setting up equipment outside, and he could see reporters interviewing people on the sidewalk. His first thought was that there had been some kind of incident in the building, but as he made his way to the elevator, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. The Rodriguez Foundation announcement is huge, one reporter was saying to another. $50 million for community development programs. That's the biggest single charitable commitment this city has seen in years. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Rodriguez Foundation was one of the most influential charitable organizations in the region, known for its strategic approach to education and community development. If they were making a major announcement about community programs, it could very well be connected to the problems he had been experiencing. In his office, Marcus immediately instructed Jennifer to find out everything she could about the Rodriguez Foundation's announcement. Within an hour, she returned with a printed copy of the press release and a look of deep concern on her face. Mr. Blackstone, I think you need to read this carefully, she said, placing the document on his desk. The foundation is launching a comprehensive program to protect community organizations from displacement due to development pressure. They're providing legal assistance, financial support, and advocacy services. Marcus read the press release with growing alarm. The Rodriguez Foundation was committing $50 million over 5 years to help communities resist what they termed predatory development practices. They would provide free legal representation to community groups facing eminent domain proceedings, offer grants to help organizations relocate if necessary, and fund advocacy campaigns to educate the public about development issues. But what made Marcus's hands tremble as he read was a specific paragraph that seemed aimed directly at his situation. The Foundation's first major initiative will support the Riverside Community Center in their ongoing legal battle to remain in their current location. This beloved community institution serves hundreds of families and provides essential services that cannot be easily replaced. Jennifer, Marcus said, his voice barely steady, I want you to find out everything you can about the Rodriguez Foundation. Who runs it? Who funds it? How they make their decisions? And I particularly want to know about their leadership. As Jennifer left to begin her research, Marcus tried to process what this meant for his business. The Rodriguez Foundation had essentially declared war on developers like him, and they had chosen his conflict with the Riverside Community Center as their first battleground. With $50 million behind them, they had the resources to fight him indefinitely. An hour later, Jennifer returned with information that would change Marcus's understanding of everything that had happened over the past week. She placed a folder on his desk and sat down with an expression he had never seen before. Mr. Blackstone, I found the information about the Rodriguez Foundation leadership, she began carefully. The foundation was established 12 years ago by Emma Rodriguez, following her inheritance of her grandfather's estate. Her grandfather, Roberto Rodriguez, was a successful businessman who built a chain of restaurants and invested heavily in real estate. Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation in his chest. Emma Rodriguez? Yes, sir. She's been running the foundation since its inception. She's 34 years old, has a master's degree in public administration from Stanford, and has been recognized nationally for her work in education and community development. Jennifer paused, studying Marcus's face. Sir, does the name mean something to you? Marcus's mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. What does she look like? Do you have a picture? Jennifer opened the folder and pulled out a professional photograph that had accompanied a magazine article about the foundation's work. The woman in the photo was wearing a business suit and sitting behind an executive desk, but Marcus recognized her face immediately. It was the waitress from Romano's. The woman he had humiliated and dismissed as someone who would never amount to anything. The person he had told to know her place. Oh God, Marcus whispered, sinking back in his chair. Oh God, what have I done? Sir? Mr. Blackstone, are you all right? Marcus stared at the photograph, remembering every cruel word he had spoken, every condescending gesture he had made. Emma Rodriguez wasn't just a waitress. She was one of the most powerful philanthropists in the state, a woman who controlled a foundation worth over $300 million, someone who had been personally recognized by governors and senators for her contributions to society. And he had told her that she was just a waitress who needed to know her place. Jennifer, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, I need you to cancel all my appointments for today, and I need you to get me the phone number for Romano's restaurant. As Jennifer left to make the arrangements, Marcus continued staring at Emma's photograph, trying to understand the full scope of his mistake. The woman he had dismissed as insignificant was responsible for the legal challenges, the city reviews, and the systematic pressure on his business. She hadn't responded to his cruelty with anger or revenge. She had responded with the kind of strategic, methodical action that only someone with serious resources and deep knowledge of how systems worked could orchestrate. Marcus realized that every problem he had experienced over the past week was connected to his treatment of Emma. The mysterious legal representation for the community center, the city's sudden interest in reviewing his safety protocols, the banking concerns, even the subtle changes in how other businesses treated him. All of it could be traced back to that one terrible evening at Romano's. But what made his realization even more devastating was understanding that Emma's response hadn't been petty or vindictive. Every action she had taken was directly related to the legitimate concerns about his business practices that she had obviously researched thoroughly. She hadn't attacked him personally. She had simply shined a light on the corners of his business where he had been cutting ethical corners. When Jennifer returned with the phone number for Romanos, Marcus hesitated before making the call. What could he possibly say to Emma Rodriguez? How could he apologize for behavior that had revealed the ugliest aspects of his character? But he knew he had to try. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Romano's Italian restaurant. This is Tony. Tony, this is Marcus Blackstone. I was wondering if I could speak with Emma Rodriguez. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Blackstone, Emma doesn't work here anymore. Marcus felt his heart sink even further. She quit. No, sir. She was never really an employee in the traditional sense. Emma has been volunteering here for 3 years, working shifts to help us out, and to stay connected with the service industry. Her foundation has been one of our biggest supporters, helping us provide job training programs for people transitioning back into the workforce. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Emma hadn't been working at Romano's because she needed the money. She had been volunteering her time, giving back to her community, staying connected to the experiences of working people. And he had treated her with contempt, assuming she was beneath him simply because she was wearing a server's uniform. Tony, Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice steady. Is there any way I can contact her? I need to apologize. Mr. Blackstone, I think you should know that everyone here witnessed what happened that night. Emma handled your behavior with more grace than anyone should have to show, but it was really difficult to watch. Tony's voice was carefully controlled. If you genuinely want to apologize, you can contact the Rodriguez Foundation directly. But, sir, I hope you understand that what happened here wasn't just rude behavior. It was something much uglier than that. After ending the call with Tony, Marcus spent the rest of the morning researching Emma Rodriguez and her foundation's work. What he discovered made him feel smaller and more ashamed with each passing hour. Emma had dedicated her life to helping people who were dismissed and overlooked by society. She had funded scholarship programs that sent thousands of students to college, supported job training initiatives that helped people escape poverty, and advocated for policies that protected vulnerable communities. The Riverside Community Center that Marcus had tried to demolish was just one of dozens of organizations that Emma's foundation supported. She had seen his attempt to destroy it not just as a business decision, but as an attack on the people and programs she had dedicated her life to protecting. By noon, Marcus had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. He called his lawyer and instructed him to withdraw all legal challenges related to the Riverside Community Center property. He contacted Councilman Davidson and told him to abandon any efforts to use eminent domain for the shopping complex project. And he began drafting a public statement acknowledging that his development plans for that location had been inappropriate. But Marcus knew that these actions, while necessary, weren't enough. He had revealed something fundamental about his character that night at Romano's. And simply backing down from one project wouldn't address the deeper issues that Emma's investigation had uncovered about his business practices. That afternoon, Marcus did something he had never done before in his professional life. He called a meeting with all of his project managers and construction supervisors and announced that Blackstone Development would be implementing new policies prioritizing worker safety, environmental protection, and community engagement. Projects would take longer and cost more, but they would be done right. More importantly, Marcus established a fund to compensate contractors and suppliers who had been underpaid or treated unfairly by his company in the past. He couldn't undo his previous behavior, but he could try to make amends for it. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself thinking not about the financial impact of these changes, but about the moment when Emma had simply nodded and said she would get his check. She could have destroyed his arrogance right there in the restaurant. She could have told him exactly who she was and watched him crumble with embarrassment. Instead, she had maintained her dignity and chosen to respond in a way that might actually teach him something valuable. That evening, Marcus returned to Romano's one more time. The hostess recognized him and seated him at a small table in the main dining room. When his server approached, Marcus looked up to see Michael, the young man who had served him on his previous visit. "Good evening, Mr. Blackstone," Michael said politely. "What can I get for you tonight?" "Actually," Marcus said, "I was hoping to speak with Tony if he has a few minutes. I have something I'd like to say to him." When Tony appeared, Marcus stood and extended his hand. "Tony, I want to apologize for my behavior the other night. It was completely inexcusable, and I'm sorry you and your staff had to witness it." Tony shook his hand cautiously. "I appreciate that, Mr. Blackstone. But Emma was the one who deserved better treatment." "I know, and I'm going to try to contact her foundation to apologize properly. But I also want you to know that I've learned something important from this experience. About how I treat people, and about the assumptions I make based on appearances." As Marcus left Romano's that evening, he realized that his encounter with Emma Rodriguez had changed him in ways that went far beyond his business practices. For the first time in his adult life, he understood that respect wasn't something you could buy or demand. It was something you earned through your actions and character. Emma Rodriguez had taught him that lesson not through humiliation or revenge, but through the quiet demonstration of what true strength and class looked like. She had shown him that the most powerful people often work in ways that others never see, and that judging someone by their appearance or their job was not just wrong, but foolish. Marcus never did get the chance to apologize to Emma directly, but he spent the rest of his career trying to honor the lesson she had taught him, treating every person he met with the respect and dignity that Emma had shown him even when he deserved neither. And sometimes, late at night in his office, he would look out at the city lights and remember the woman who had changed his life simply by refusing to let his cruelty diminish her dignity. Now, everything seemed to be unraveling simultaneously, and he couldn't identify the source of his problems. It was as if someone who understood his business better than he understood it himself was systematically targeting his vulnerabilities. Marcus had built his empire by being aggressive, by pushing boundaries, and by never backing down from a fight. But this was different. He couldn't fight an enemy he couldn't see, and he was beginning to realize that someone with significant resources and sophisticated knowledge of business and politics was working against him. As he sat in his darkening office, looking out at the city lights below, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his treatment of the waitress at Romano's had somehow started this chain of events. It seemed impossible that such a minor incident could have such far-reaching consequences. But the timing was too coincidental to ignore. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Blackstone was beginning to understand what it felt like to be powerless in the face of forces beyond his control. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice was starting to suggest that maybe, just maybe, he had seriously underestimated someone he had dismissed as just a waitress. The weekend would bring no relief from his problems, and by Monday morning, Marcus would discover that his troubles were just beginning. Someone was playing a very sophisticated game, and he was starting to realize that he might not even understand the rules. That the community center was run by a small staff and operated on an extremely tight budget. They had been in their current building for 15 years, serving as an anchor institution for a neighborhood that had struggled with poverty and limited resources. "There's one more thing," Sarah added. "I contacted my friend at the city planning office. She says Blackstone hasn't given up on this project. He's apparently working with some city council members to find ways around the planning commission's rejection. There's talk about using eminent domain to force the community center to relocate." Emma felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. Marcus Blackstone wasn't just rude to service workers. He was actively working to destroy institutions that helped the most vulnerable members of their community. His comment about people knowing their place took on an even more sinister meaning in this context. "Sarah, I want you to set up a meeting with the director of the Riverside Community Center. Tell them the Rodriguez Foundation is interested in discussing a potential partnership, and see if you can find out more about Blackstone's political connections. If he's working with city council members, I want to know who and how." As Sarah left to make the arrangements, Emma turned back to her window overlooking the city. Somewhere down there, Marcus Blackstone was probably in his office, making deals and moving money around, confident in his power to reshape the world according to his wishes. He had no idea that his cruel behavior the night before had set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about power and influence. Emma had spent years learning that real power didn't come from humiliating others or throwing money around. It came from building relationships, understanding complex systems, and working patiently toward meaningful change. Marcus Blackstone was about to get an education in what that kind of power could accomplish. But first, Emma had work to do. She had a community center to save, a new program to implement, and a very important lesson to teach. And, unlike Marcus Blackstone, she planned to accomplish all of this while treating everyone involved with dignity and respect. Tony appeared again, looking concerned. Emma, why don't you take a break? Go sit in the office for a few minutes. I can handle your other tables. But Emma shook her head. I'm fine, really. I want to finish my shift. She looked toward the door where Marcus had disappeared. Some people think they can judge others based on their job or their bank account, but they have no idea who they're really dealing with. As Emma returned to her other tables, she was already formulating a plan. Marcus Blackstone thought he knew everything about power and influence. He believed his money made him untouchable, that his wealth gave him the right to humiliate and belittle others without consequence. Tomorrow, Emma would show him just how wrong he was. But tonight, she would finish her shift with the same dignity and professionalism that had characterized her entire career at Romano's. Because unlike Marcus Blackstone, Emma understood that true class had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with how you treated other people when you thought no one important was watching. What Marcus didn't realize was that someone very important had been watching all along, and that someone was about to turn his carefully ordered world completely upside down. Emma felt her patience wearing thin, but she maintained her professional facade. She had dealt with worse customers before, and she would get through this evening as well. What Marcus didn't know, what no one in the restaurant knew, was that Emma's biggest decision each day involved managing a multi-million-dollar charitable foundation, overseeing educational programs that help thousands of students, and making choices that affected entire communities. As the main courses arrived, Marcus continued his pattern of complaints and condescending remarks. When Giuseppe's perfectly prepared lobster ravioli was placed before him, Marcus cut into one piece and took a careful bite. He chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. "It's acceptable," he finally said, as if bestowing a great honor. Tell the chef he managed not to ruin it completely. Emma bit back her response, reminding herself that this shift would eventually end. She had endured worse than Marcus Blackstone's petty cruelty, and she would survive this too. But, deep down, she was beginning to formulate a plan that would teach this arrogant man a lesson he would never forget. As the evening progressed, other diners began to take notice of Marcus's behavior toward Emma. She could see sympathetic glances from nearby tables and hear whispered comments about his rudeness. The atmosphere in Romano's had shifted, becoming tense and uncomfortable. Marcus seemed oblivious to the negative attention he was drawing. In his world, money insulated him from consequences, and he believed his wealth gave him the right to treat others however he pleased. He had no idea that his behavior was being carefully observed, not just by other diners, but by someone who had the power to impact his life in ways he couldn't imagine. Emma's shift was far from over, and Marcus had no intention of making the rest of the evening any easier for her. But what he didn't realize was that he had just picked a fight with someone who fought back in ways he never saw coming.